I'm Tori Bedford. Tonight on Greater Boston, it was the murder before the bombing. 3 people brutally killed in a Waltham apartment 13 years ago, and one reporter believes marathon bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev was involved. I'll talk to her about her new book and the investigation to connect the dots. Then AI is being used to create pornographic images of people without their consent, and Taylor Swift is far from the only one targeted. How are lawmakers responding? Two years and a few months before Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev set off 2 bombs at the 2013 Boston Marathon finish line, 3 men were brutally murdered at a home in Waltham. The case quickly fell out of the news cycle, but local journalist and a friend of one of the victims, Susan Zalkind, kept digging. In over a decade of reporting, she's discovered links between one of the bombers and the Waltham murder victims and raised the question, if law enforcement had dug deeper in 2011, could they have prevented the Boston Marathon bombings? Susan lays it all out in her new book, The Waltham Murders. She joins me now. Hi, thank you so much for being here. So, you have made connections. I think everybody remembers the tragedy of the Boston Marathon bombing, 2013. But there was this other case that you've drawn clear connections to. Can you take us to 2011 and just kind of explain just the rough outline of what happened?
So you have the Boston Marathon bombing, the tragedy there with Tamerlan Tsarnaev and his younger brother, Dzhokhar. Now, in 2011, on September 11th, 2011, there was a horrific triple homicide in Waltham. 3 men were found with their throats slit. Marijuana was dumped on 2 of the bodies. There was cash strewn around the crime scene. This was a very unusual murder. And one of those victims was Brendan Mess, who had been best friends and sparring partners with Tamerlan Tsarnaev. Another one of the victims was Eric Wiseman, who had been a friend of mine. And the third victim was Raphael Tekin, who was the son of a prominent Jewish spiritual leader in the Greater Boston community.
And at the time, so you were working at NEC, and you were at the New England Cable News, which is now NBC, and you were kind of looking for your next big story because you'd been doing a lot of crime reporting. In your book, you write about how you thought the reaction to it was very strange initially. What was the kind of report, even before you knew that you had a personal connection, what was your reaction to hearing about this story?
I was an aspiring crime beat reporter. I had the first job out of college. I was working the overnight shift. And there's a lot of things I don't know, but I was familiar with crime in the Boston area. And so I was looking, and there was this murder that broke across the wire, triple homicide. Victims, their throats were slit. And I thought this was an unusual case. It's in a quiet suburban community. And then I found out one of the victims was my friend, and I thought I was done with crime reporting for good.
Right, so you took a step back, right, and then what happens?
The Boston Marathon bombing happens. I think everybody in this community, that was a huge event. You have the bombing, then you have the days-long manhunt. And when it turned out that the perpetrators were Tamerlan Tsarnaev and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, that's when I first learned about the connection between Tamerlan and Brendan. And for many people close to the case, it was almost worse than the murders themselves. And I was wondering, okay, what's next? You know, the whole world is looking at Boston. Members of law enforcement on every level are paying attention to this case. It was horrible, but I thought at least maybe we'll have answers if there's a connection between Tamerlan Tsarnaev and the 9/11/11 brutal murder of his friend. But what happened instead was 1 month later, law enforcement, an FBI agent, 2 Massachusetts state troopers led by the Middlesex County DA's office, shot a man dead in his own home, Ibrahim Tadashev, while they were questioning him about the homicide. And now there was reporting, but it was all anonymous sources claiming that Ibrahim Tadashev confessed and that he implicated Tamerlan and himself in the murders. But no one was saying this on record. Was it true? And why was Ibrahim killed? And that was the point where I, even as a young journalist and with a connection to this case, I couldn't look away again. And I made a promise to myself to stick with this case, to push it forward as as far as I could and to tell this story as fairly, accurately, and thoroughly as I was able. And here I am. The book isn't officially out yet. I'm here for you in part, Tori. But
When does it come out?
It's available now.
Yeah.
This is a soft launch. It's available on Amazon as part of the Amazon First Reads program. So it's free for a month. So what's really great about this is I want the story to go out there. I want people to read. It's no cost right now. And go read the book.
Right, and you've done this Hulu docuseries about this. When I first met you, I was in college. I was doing a story about Ibrahim Tadashev because I thought that story was very, very strange, right? There were multiple reports, things were conflicting. It was based off of this very strange murder, right? Like initially, it was about a stabbing, and I think in your Hulu series, you were like, that's personal, right? And they said it was a drug crime, but there was marijuana all over the bodies. There were so many unanswered questions. And so I was working on something about it. We started talking, and as long as I have known you, over a decade, you have been working on this. So this book, I think you wrote in the book, like, this is, I think that this is what I have now, right? Like, this is what I've come up with in terms of finally kind of putting out, like having a feeling of some closure on this, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I won a records request and I got some more interviews. But yeah, we've known each other. You interviewed me about this story when you were
I think in 2013, right.
You were a student reporter.
But that's how long you have been on this, right? Mm-hmm. This book is your opus. And I wonder what you found that's new in the case, or what the changes are, what your new theories are in the book that makes you feel like, okay, this is, I've put this out there. I think this is a quote from your book where you said, these are my theories, I'm putting this out there, I have the evidence. I think the chapter is called Evidence. If there were holes in this theory, then I would be duty-bound by my own conscience, if nothing else, to reveal them to you. That was the whole point of turning this book into a memoir. The reason I inserted myself into this narrative in the first place, this story could end with my failure, but at least I would not have to warp the facts to fit a narrative that isn't true. You have been searching for the truth in the face of so much misinformation. What did you find that made you confident to say, okay, I'm publishing this, I'm putting this out?
Tamerlan Tsarnaev and Ibrahim Tadashev did it. And I've established that earlier in the docuseries. There's a lot more evidence in the book. And there's financial records. There's the fact that his wife told me that Ibrahim left Boston 2 days after the murder, and then suddenly he had a lot of money. There's information after information, pieces of evidence that together, there's no other logical conclusion.
And
right.
As someone with a really close connection, you talked about this in the book, your relationship with Eric, and the time you spent together, you could talk about anything. Was it frustrating for you over the last decade, but even in the years right after the stabbing, to see the response from law enforcement, right? Because we learned later that they had records, and the FBI had been following Tamerlan for years preceding the bombing.
Absolutely. So look, Ibrahim Tadashev and Tamerlan Tsarnaev killed those 3 men. That's part of the story. Now, there's questions: what happened after the bombing? What happened before it? Why is it up to me, a journalist and a friend of one of the victims, to put forth these answers? Now, the docuseries looks at the federal case, the death penalty trial, and why the federal government and law enforcement agencies may not have put pressure on the Middlesex County to get answers after the fact. Potentially, there's a conflict of interest. What this book looks at very carefully is what happened before the bombing. Because if they caught Tamerlan Tsarnaev after the triple homicide, the Boston Marathon bombing may never have happened. So I think, this is a crime story. I think usually when people think about crime stories, they think about Whitey Bulger, basically the villains that were at large in our grandparents' heyday.
Right, like the old.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stories. This story takes place in Greater Boston, in suburbia, and there's a storied history of crime here as well. In my book, I look into that further, and I found that the victims and members of law enforcement tasked with investigating their crime were part of the same criminal milieu. Now, the case is still open. The Middlesex District Attorney is not providing any answers, and basically what they're asking is for the public to just trust that they're doing their job, with no oversight for a decade with a murder case that's connected to the Boston Marathon bombing. And I think that raises pretty serious questions.
I mean, yeah, what are you hoping will come out as a result of this book and of this research and your new findings?
I mean, there's another part of this story as well, which is, as you know, I had questions about the woman who found the bodies and her other dead lovers. And I found that that was part of the story too. So far as what's next for me, am I going to devote my whole life to this in the same way? No, but nor am I going to turn away. But I don't think it should be up to me to provide those answers. I mean, nothing I write or say can ever take the place of a statement from people in authority. The Middlesex DA's office, which started with Jerry Leone. It was passed on to Marion Ryan, who's spent decades in that office, who was part of the initial investigation, who's still tasked with the case now. Attorney General Martha Coakley had an opportunity to get involved after the bombing. The victims' families asked her to. You know, if she did a review of Middlesex, she would be doing a review of her old colleagues, her old office, while she was running a campaign. That never happened. Then the next AG was Maura Healey. I asked her, are you going to look at this? She said that she wasn't.
She said she wasn't?
No. The office, when she was AG, her office took no interest in getting involved in this case in any way.
Because it's not her district?
I mean, it could be her district. The Massachusetts state law says that AG has oversight of all of the DAs. There used to be more government in Middlesex, county government, that dissolved in the 90s. That isn't there anymore. If you're looking for oversight, that would be the AG. Maybe
right. She's the governor now, so I think you're probably hoping that she'll look into it in that capacity. But
I'm here to tell this story as truthfully and honestly and accurately as I'm able. I think we should be asking if it's okay for our DAs not to have oversight, and to remember that we elect these people into office.
What's astounding to me is that there's so much in here and it's so comprehensive, and yet there are things also that you left out. But this is, I think, you know, this is, how do you feel about this coming out after this long decade?
You know, we're not officially doing publicity now, and so I'm still very much processing. There's a lot of grief. There's some satisfaction here, just knowing that I did my best at every step of the way.
Great. The Waltham murders, one woman's pursuit to expose the truth behind a murder and a national tragedy. Susan Claire Zalkine, thank you so much for joining us.
Tori Bedford.
Thanks. When alarming AI-generated pornographic images of Taylor Swift began circulating online recently, the outcry was quick, but it's far from the first time images like these have been used to target women online. So what are lawmakers planning to do about it? To discuss, I'm joined by Haley Lerner, GBH News Associate Producer for Arts and Culture. Haley, thank you so much for joining us. So we know about, you know, we're going to talk about revenge porn. We know about AI-generated images. This is becoming a really serious phenomenon. How does this work, and what are we looking at exactly? If you can explain how this happens.
So basically, deepfakes have been a thing for a while, where people, you know, created false images of other people. But right now, with AI generator images, you can put a photo of anyone in, request it to be a certain way, and anything can pop up, and those can be pornographic images of that person meshed with whoever or any artistic imagery. And so this can really be done with any photo or any image of anyone, and it's very fast, and you don't have to have a lot of skills to do it.
So people were doing this with images of Taylor Swift, and I think they made it so that you couldn't search her on the website because it was so pervasive. Actress Xochitl Gomez, who is on Dancing with the Stars, she's only 17 years old. She's talking. Here's a clip of her talking about having AI deepfakes of her online and not being able to take it down.
For me, it wasn't like something that was mind-boggling, but just more like why is it so hard to take down?
Yeah.
You know? And that was my like whole thought on it, was just like, why is this allowed?
Yeah.
You know? And I just thought it was weird. And in my mind, I knew that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
So it didn't like mess with me or anything like that. But it was just like something that felt really uncomfortable because I couldn't take it down.
This isn't just something affecting celebrities, right? This is happening to people everywhere.
Yeah, there was a case in New Jersey of a high school student who came forward and said her and 30 other of her female classmates had their fellow students were making AI-created images of them in pornographic situations, and they wanted action in New Jersey. And so this is at risk to really anyone because, of course, with public figures like this, like Xochitl, who's a 17-year-old who very perverted fans can make these types of images of her, it could be done to any normal person, too.
Yeah, you're talking about Francesca Mani, who's only 14 years old. And she and, you said three dozen of her, or several dozen of her classmates were subjected to this. She lives in New Jersey, where it is illegal. Revenge porn is illegal. Massachusetts and South Carolina are the only states where it is not. Can you talk about what's in process there in terms of why is that the case, first of all, and what are legislators doing about it?
Yeah, so right now, revenge porn, which typically in many cases, revenge porn is when you take a sexually explicit image of someone, which could be taken consensually at the time and shared around without their consent. And so right now there is, in this Mass House, it just passed through a revenge porn bill. It's going on to the Senate, and this bill will make revenge porn illegal. And there also is a statute created by Representative Trisha Farley Bouvier, and that statute has a line about AI created images. So it's not just an actual image that it can be a case of revenge porn. A falsely created image can have the exact same damage as a real one.
Yeah, here you spoke to Trisha Farley Bouvier. She's a Democrat representing Pittsfield. She spoke to you about how she's looking into the law and how it impacts victims.
We're considering it a very serious offense. It's really a violation of a person, to do something like that. And remembering that, even with these high-profile cases in the last few days that we've been hearing about, yes, some of the bigger companies have taken them down and stopped their spread. But once something's on the internet, it's never, ever gone.
So as a part of the Preventing Deepfakes of Intimate Images Act, they added this statute that includes AI or digital images of someone. It went through the House. It's going to the Senate. And it states that any individual who's the subject of an intimate digital depiction without the consent of that individual may bring a civil action against that person in an appropriate district court of the United States. And an individual's consent to the creation of the intimate digital depiction shall not establish that the person consented to its disclosure. So what would this, obviously that's the legal language, but what would this legislation do?
It makes it illegal because right now it's not illegal. The only kind of legal source that you can kind of go through right now is potentially harassment. But as it was explained to me by some legislators, harassment only qualifies if it's repeated multiple offenses. So a single instance of this wouldn't qualify, meaning a lot of cases of revenge porn would never have any repercussions for. So with this, there'd be multiple levels based on how many times an offender does this and the severity, and it's down to a judge, but it makes it illegal, which currently it's not in Massachusetts.
This is really devastating. I think that this is something that I could see in a school setting someone thought was maybe benign, or, there's obvious, these deep, deep threads of sexism and just exploitation. But in your reporting, you talked to a lot of people who talked about how much this hurts people and why. Can you explain that? It's not real, right? It's a generated image of someone. But why is it still so painful?
It's still an image of you in a sexually exploitative position, whether it's real or not. Other people might think it's real. And from what I've talked to Jane Doe Inc., which represents, a lot of survivors, and this can cause actual harm towards someone. It could encourage more sexual violence towards them because people are seeing these horrific images of you out there. And so it really can have a real effect on your job. They may not know it's a fake image. That's how realistic some of these things can be. And it just has a real impact.
It's interesting, too, to think about your intellectual property or your identity, right? When we think about how so many of the SAG actors who were just on strike were fighting to not enter these deals where they would essentially be selling their image. Do you think this is an example of the technology moving faster than legislation or moving faster than we can kind of regulate it?
Yeah, it's a real violation of your personal image, and with how much every single person in the world is basically on social media, your image is out there and people can do whatever they want with it. And in this state right now, there's no repercussions for that.
Right. Haley Lerner, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your reporting.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Adam Riley will talk to State Representative China Tyler and GBH's Sarah Betancourt about the state temporarily turning the Melnia Cass Recreation Complex in Roxbury into a migrant shelter. Plus, should the Boston Globe have run a recent column on Vermont for medical aid in dying after they found out about the reporter's personal involvement in the story? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. I'm Tori Bedford. Good night.
I'm deep in the Lynn Woods, inside the belly of the beast, Dungeon Rock. Some say that this place is seriously haunted. Do you worry that it's actually haunted?
For sure. Yes, absolutely.
Others that it hides the treasure of 17th century pirate Thomas Veal.
He's in the cave, the treasure's in the cave, and he's smashed flat. So this rock becomes his dungeon.
One thing that is certain, it was dug by a man who believed he was being led right here from beyond the grave. So there is a supposedly haunted cave here in Lynn. We're gonna get to the bottom of this spooky story, and our quest begins right here.
I grew up not too far from the woods. We definitely learned about Dungeon Rock as kids, for sure. It's a pretty cool and compelling story.
In the mid-1800s, the woods entered an ominous chapter, becoming a hotbed of the paranormal, thanks to a Massachusetts man named Hiram Marble, a member of a social religious movement called spiritualism.
They had mediums that believed that they could speak to people that have passed on, and so Hiram Marble would use these mediums.
Marble purchased the land in Lynn Woods because he believed he was being led there by one spirit in particular, the ghost of a pirate from the 1600s named Thomas Veal.
Stories have it that there was a pirate who ended up taking up shop there, hiding with his treasure. An earthquake happened and he was sealed in the cave with the treasure, allegedly.
The pirate story first appeared in print nearly 2 centuries after it supposedly happened, and soon versions began popping up all over. And it was against this backdrop that Hiram Marble and his son Edwin would spend 30 years relentlessly digging a cave in search of the remains of Thomas Veal and his buried treasure. A cave still there today, Dungeon Rock.
Would you be interested in joining me for a little trip to the pirate cave?
There are a lot of people who still go to Dungeon Rock. I'm just not one of them.
Wait, you've never been inside?
No.
Why?
It creeps me out a little bit.
Do you worry that it's actually haunted? Like, do you?
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yes, absolutely. I don't need to encounter that spirit.
At the edge of the woods, today a 2,200-acre park, we met up with Ranger Dan Small, our guide into the heart of Hiram Marble's unholy obsession. There was no turning back now.
There are people who won't go in At one time, 20 years ago, I had an assistant ranger, and he was a rugged guy. He was like a regular guy, but he would not go in there.
As the original story goes, one night in 1658, a mysterious ship appeared in the bay. 4 men, including Thomas Veal, were seen rowing from it up the Saugus River. They took up residency in the woods.
And he had the treasure with him, which is the important part.
3 of the pirates were captured by authorities, but Thomas Veal escaped.
He ran up into here with the treasure. Behind this big rock that you're standing next to, there's actually a natural cave.
And there he lived for a time, until a great earthquake struck and collapsed his makeshift abode.
That's why it's called Dungeon Rock. This is the pirate's dungeon, because a big boulder has him trapped underneath it.
As for the veracity of this old yarn,
There were pirates in this area at that time. There really was a guy named Tom Veal. There's records of him in the Salem court.
But while there are first-hand records of earthquakes here in 1638 and 1663, there wasn't one in 1658.
Another major fault with the story, too, is nowhere before about 1850 or 1840 is there any reference to this area being called Dungeon Rock.
True or not, Hiram Marble wholeheartedly believed the tale. As for people today,
I found ritually killed chickens. I found things with candles and coconut and all sorts of things that were set up. It's easy to dismiss it all as a hoax or hooey, but the reality is a lot of people still believe that there's something going on up here, and who am I to say there isn't?
out of excuses and reasons to stall, it was time to enter this literal underworld. Inside, it is cold, it is damp, and it is dark. The tunnel is erratic.
They actually would hold seances in the cave. The ghost would appear, and he would say, go right, go left, and that's why it makes these abrupt changes.
And it abruptly ends, 174 feet from the start, with 2 stagnant pools of water.
We got a trusty ghost meter here. It runs on a 9-volt battery, so I'm not sure how much of a ghost meter it can really be, but we're gonna turn it on and see what we find here at the end of the cave. All right. The needle seems to be doing absolutely nothing in any direction. Oh, a little bounce here.
What, honestly, what the was that?
Turns out it was just some kids messing with us.
Like that was legitimately for a moment terrifying.
In the end, there were no ghosts, there was no gold. A disappointment I think the Marbles might relate to. Hiram passed away in 1868. Edwin kept digging until his death in 1880 and is buried in an unmarked grave just steps from the cave's entrance. They didn't find the treasure either, but in a way, they did get what they were looking for.
Edwin and Hiram's plan from the start, and they made this very public, was that if they ever found the money, they were going to buy all this land around here and they were going to turn it into a park for the people in Lynn.
Today, it is exactly that, and their man-made cave at Dungeon Rock is free and open to the public whenever the weather allows. So yes, you can come and see it for yourself if you dare.
Muhammad Ali was an activist who fought to move America in a certain way.
I have a cause to fight for.
There was going to be an enormous price to pay for that.
The person he is today is way bigger than him just boxing.
Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Next time on Antiques Roadshow, can you guess which guest just heard that their treasure is worth 6 figures?
Are you serious? Wow.